The sandy shore felt a world away as I drifted in the open sea. A sudden pull on my leg nearly dragged me under, panic setting in. The water turned murky as the predator made its presence known. Its jaws opened wide, and I was its target. Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we start with today's shark attack story, I want to ask for your support by subscribing to the channel. Your subscription is very important to us, so please subscribe and leave a comment letting me know where in the world you are watching from. Click the like button, and let's get into the story. The morning sun spilled golden light across the beaches of Malibu, casting long shadows from the lifeguard towers onto the shimmering sand. A soft breeze carried the salty tang of the ocean and the distant cry of gulls as 17-year-old Jamie Carter knelt beside his surfboard, applying a final layer of wax. His movements were deliberate, his brow furrowed in concentration. The air buzzed with the energy of the day's surf competition, with surfers, families, and spectators dotting the shore. "You ready to lose today, Carter?" teased Ryan, a fellow surfer, as he strolled by with his board tucked under one arm. His grin was wide, cocky, and playful. Jamie smirked, not looking up. "Only if you find a way to stay on your board for more than 10 seconds. Laughter erupted from the small group of teenagers nearby. Ryan chuckled, feigning offense as he walked away. Jamie glanced toward the water, where competitors were already paddling out, their silhouettes stark against the sunlit waves. "Focus, Jamie," he muttered to himself, standing and stretching. His board, a well-worn shortboard with a faded decal of a shark tooth near the tail, rested on the sand. The ocean was alive, the swells rising and curling in perfect sets. Today felt different, special. From the pier, spectators gathered to watch the event. The announcer's voice crackled through a loudspeaker. "Next heat begins in 5 minutes. Surfers in Group B, get ready." Jamie inhaled deeply, trying to calm the nervous energy swirling in his chest. Surfing had always been his escape, a place where the noise of the world faded, leaving only the rhythm of the ocean. But today the stakes felt higher. Winning the local competition could open doors, maybe even land him a sponsorship. He grabbed his board and jogged toward the shoreline. Further out, a lone fisherman stood on the deck of his boat, anchored about a mile offshore. He adjusted his cap, squinting at the surface of the water. Something wasn't right. The baitfish, usually active this time of day, had vanished. In their place was an eerie stillness, the kind that made his skin crawl. "Strange," he muttered, reeling in his line. As the hook broke the surface, a sudden splash drew his attention. A large seal burst from the water, thrashing violently, its dark eyes wide with terror. The fisherman leaned over the edge, gripping the railing as a massive shadow moved beneath the waves. Too quick to identify. "God help them if that's what I think it is," he said, his voice low, eyes scanning the horizon toward the surfers near the beach. Jamie paddled out into the lineup, his arms slicing through the cold water. Around him, other surfers jockeyed for position, laughing and calling out to one another. He felt a mix of excitement and tension as he positioned himself for the next set. The waves were ideal, and his instincts told him today could be his best performance yet. "Yo, Sammy," Ryan called from a few yards away, straddling his board. "You see that seal earlier? Looked like something took a chunk out of it." Jamie glanced over, frowning. "What, really?" Ryan shrugged. "Yeah, back near the rocks. Probably just a bad scrap with another seal, though. Happens all the time." Before Jamie could respond, a wave began to rise behind them, pulling the water taut and smooth. The competitors turned, paddling hard to catch it. Jamie surged forward, timing his pop-up perfectly. As he dropped into the face of the wave, he felt the familiar rush the world narrowing to the sound of his board slicing through the water and the sensation of pure control. From the beach, spectators cheered, their voices barely audible over the crash of the wave. Beneath the surface, unseen by anyone above, a great white shark prowled the shallows. Drawn by the vibrations of splashing paddles and the thrumming energy of its environment, the predator moved with calculated precision. It had been hunting for hours, following a natural rhythm that often led it to these waters during the warmer months. Its black, soulless eyes scanned the figures above, its streamlined body cutting through the water like a torpedo. The shark's instincts were finely tuned, its senses picking up the electric signals of movement and the faint coppery scent of blood from the injured seal. It didn't see people or boards, only the silhouette of prey. Jamie paddled back to the lineup, his grin wide. "That felt amazing," he said to no one in particular, his chest heaving. His confidence was growing with each wave, a sense of invincibility creeping in. "Nice ride," called Maya, a competitor he admired. "That one's gonna be hard to beat." He gave her a thumbs up, his focus already shifting to the next set. A larger swell was building in the distance, and Jamie turned, paddling toward it. Around him, the water seemed to shift subtly, the once playful energy of the ocean growing still. He felt it but brushed it off his nerves. As the wave approached, he positioned himself, catching the rising energy beneath him. But as he stood, the board wobbled, and he lost his balance. Jamie plunged into the water, his body twisting as he hit the surface. For a moment, everything was quiet, the muffled roar of the wave above, the cold embrace of the ocean. Then it came. A sudden, crushing force clamped onto his leg, yanking him downward with terrifying speed. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and all-consuming. Jamie thrashed, his instincts taking over as he kicked and struck out with his free leg. He surfaced briefly, gasping for air, his scream cutting through the chaos. "Shark!" someone shouted from the lineup, their voice cracking with panic. The water around Jamie turned crimson, staining the pristine waves. On the beach, chaos erupted. Spectators pointed and screamed as lifeguards sprang into action. Tyler Jensen, the head lifeguard, grabbed a rescue board and sprinted into the surf. "Stay calm, Jamie," he yelled, paddling furiously toward the struggling teen. His heart pounded as he saw the dorsal fins slicing through the water, circling its wounded target. Jamie's mind raced, his vision blurring as he felt the shark release him momentarily. He clawed at his shattered board, clinging to it as another wave surged overhead. The predator returned, its massive body brushing against him, sending a shiver of primal terror through his core. Tyler reached him just as the shark made another pass. "Grab on," he shouted, pulling Jamie onto the rescue board. Blood poured from the torn flesh of Jamie's leg, and Tyler worked quickly, tying a tourniquet above the wound with practiced hands. "I've got you, Tid," Tyler said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "We're getting you out of here." As Tyler paddled them back toward shore, the shark lingered for a moment longer, its dark shape gliding silently beneath the surface. Then, with a flick of its tail, it disappeared into the depths, leaving only the echoes of its violence behind. Back on the beach, medics rushed to Jamie as Tyler dragged him onto the sand. His leg was a mangled mess of torn skin and muscle, but he was alive. Jamie's parents pushed through the crowd, their faces pale and stricken. "Jamie, baby," his mother sobbed, falling to her knees beside him. "Oh my God, is he okay?" "He's stable," one of the medics assured her, though their movements were urgent. "We need to get him to the hospital now." As the ambulance sped away, the ocean rolled on, calm and indifferent. The crowd on the beach was silent, their eyes fixed on the water where, moments ago, life and death had collided. The waves, unbroken and serene, offered no answers, only the haunting memory of what had transpired. The sun hung high in the sky, casting shimmering rays across the surface of the ocean. For the spectators on the beach, the competition had become a spectacle of skill and precision as surfers carved through wave after wave. Jamie Carter's family sat on the sand, cheering with pride. His little sister, Millie, squinted through a pair of oversized binoculars, giggling as she tried to locate her brother among the lineup. "He's out there, Mom," Millie said, pointing excitedly. "I know, sweetheart," her mother replied, smiling as she shaded her eyes to search the water. "Your brother's doing great." A cheer erupted from the pier as another surfer completed a flawless ride. Jamie, out in the lineup, was catching his breath after his last wave. He paddled slowly, scanning the horizon for the next set. Around him, the ocean felt alive, the water rolling beneath him in gentle swells. "Here comes another one," someone called. Jamie turned his board toward the shore, his muscles tensing in anticipation. A large wave was building, a perfect crest forming. He paddled hard, feeling the surge of power beneath him as the wave lifted him up. Timing his movement, he popped to his feet and dropped into the wave's face, the rush of adrenaline sharpening his focus. He shifted his weight, carving an arc across the glassy surface, the board responding as if it were an extension of his body. The crowd cheered as he pulled off a tight cutback, positioning himself for one final maneuver. Then, everything went wrong. Under the surface, the great white shark had been closing in. Drawn by the vibrations and commotion, it moved with purpose, its powerful tail propelling it forward. To the shark, Jamie's silhouette resembled a seal prey it was instinctively programmed to hunt. The predator's dorsal fin broke the surface, momentarily unnoticed by the surfers. Then, with a burst of speed, it surged upward, its jaws open wide. The impact hit Jamie like a freight train. One moment, he was gliding effortlessly along the wave. The next, he was airborne, thrown from his board by an unseen force. He plunged into the water, confusion and panic gripping him as he tried to orient himself. "What the hell?" he sputtered, gasping as he broke the surface. Pain erupted in his leg, sharp and searing, as if he'd been caught in a vice. His scream pierced the air, cutting through the sound of the crashing waves. The water around him churned and turned red. "Shark!" someone yelled from the lineup, their voice high-pitched with fear. Jamie thrashed, trying to free himself from the shark's jaws. He kicked at its snout, his instincts overriding his terror. The predator shook its massive head, its teeth tearing deeper into his flesh. The pain was indescribable, and Jamie's vision blurred as he screamed again, the sound swallowed by the sea. On the beach, chaos erupted. People stood, pointing and shouting. Lily dropped her binoculars, her face pale as she clutched her mother's hand. "Nam, Jamie," she cried, tears streaming down her face. Jamie's mother froze, her heart hammering in her chest. "Oh my God, oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Her husband grabbed her by the shoulders, steadying her as they stared helplessly at the water. Lifeguards on duty sprang into action. Tyler Jensen, the head lifeguard, grabbed his rescue board and sprinted toward the surf. His colleague Mia followed close behind, radioing for backup. "Tyler, it's bad," Mia shouted, her voice tight with urgency. "Looks like a great white." Tyler didn't respond. His focus was on Jamie, whose blood was spreading in a widening pool around him. Jamie fought with everything he had, his hands striking at the shark's rough skin. "Let me go," he choked out, though he knew the predator couldn't understand him. His vision dimmed, his strength waning as he felt the shark release him suddenly. He floated for a moment, dazed, before the primal urge to survive kicked in. He clawed at his shattered surfboard, clinging to it as a wave rolled over him. The shark circled, its dark silhouette visible beneath the surface. Jamie's breaths came in ragged gasps as he tried to paddle with one arm, his injured leg trailing uselessly behind him. "Help!" he screamed, his voice hoarse. Tyler reached him within moments, his rescue board slicing through the water. "Jamie, hold on, I'm here," he called, his voice steady despite the situation. Jamie turned his head weakly, relief flooding through him. It's still here," he whispered, his face pale and contorted with pain. "I know," Tyler said, pulling Jamie onto the rescue board. Blood streamed from Jamie's leg, and Tyler worked quickly, tying a tourniquet above the wound. "Stay with me, kid," You're gonna be okay." As Tyler paddled them back toward shore, the shark made another pass, its dorsal fin cutting through the water. Tyler's heart pounded, but he kept his movements deliberate, avoiding splashing. The shark, sensing no further opportunity, sank back into the depths. On the beach, the crowd parted as medics rushed toward the shoreline, their stretcher and medical bags at the ready. Tyler and Mia carried Jamie out of the water, their faces grim. "Get that stretcher over here now," Tyler barked. Jamie groaned, his head lolling to one side. His mother dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she reached for his face. "Jamie, baby, stay with us," she sobbed. "I'm okay," Jamie murmured, though his voice was weak. His leg was a mangled mess of torn flesh and exposed bone. The sight made his mother gag, and she turned away, clutching her husband for support. "Let's move," one of the medics shouted, stabilizing Jamie and lifting him onto the stretcher. "We need to get him to the hospital now." As the ambulance sped away, the beach fell into a heavy silence. The spectators stared at the ocean, its surface calm and undisturbed, as if nothing had happened. The water carried no trace of the violence that had unfolded moments before, save for the faint scent of blood lingering in the air. Tyler stood at the water's edge, his rescue board tucked under his arm. He stared at the horizon, his jaw tight. "Damn shark," he muttered under his breath. But deep down, he knew the predator wasn't evil just following its nature. For the ocean, life carried on. The waves continued to roll in, indifferent to the tragedy that had just occurred. The shark, a shadow in the vast expanse, disappeared into the blue, leaving only scars physical and emotional in its wake. The sound of the ambulance faded into the distance, leaving an eerie quiet over the beach. The competition was canceled, and lifeguards patrolled the shoreline, their radios crackling with updates. The once bustling crowd now stood in stunned clusters, speaking in hushed tones or staring blankly at the water. The image of Jamie Carter's blood in the surf was burned into their minds. Tyler Jensen sat on the sand, gripping the handle of his rescue board tightly. His knuckles were white, his breath uneven as adrenaline coursed through him. He glanced down at his hands, still smeared with Jamie's blood. The tourniquet he had tied had been quick, desperate, but effective enough to slow the bleeding. "Tyler, you okay?" asked Mia, his colleague, crouching beside him. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the fear she was working hard to suppress. Tyler nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah, I'm good. He stopped, shaking his head. "I thought we were gonna lose him out there." Mia placed a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't. You got him out. That kid's alive because of you." At the lifeguard tower, a small team was debriefing. Captain Mark Evans, a seasoned lifeguard with years of experience under his belt, leaned over a desk littered with maps, binoculars, and shark attack data sheets. His weathered face was set in a grim expression as he pointed to the area where Jamie had been attacked. "We've had reports of increased shark activity along this stretch in the last few weeks," Mark said, tracing a finger over the map. "But nothing like this. It's rare for a great white to come this close to shore and attack during the day." "Any word on Jamie's condition?" Mia asked as she and Tyler entered the tower. Mark looked up, his expression softening slightly. "He's critical but stable. The medics think he's got a fighting chance." Tyler exhaled a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Kide," he said, dropping into a chair. "Because for a second out there, I wasn't sure he'd make it." "You did everything right, Tyler," Mark said firmly. "But this isn't over. That shark's still out there." Out on the water, a small patrol boat cut through the waves. 2 officers from the California Department of Fish and Wildlife scanned the surface with sharp, practiced eyes. Armed with drone equipment and tracking devices, they were tasked with assessing the situation and determining whether the shark was still in the area. "Anything on sonar?" asked Officer Delgado, her fingers tapping anxiously against the side of the console. The partner, Officer Graham, shook his head. "Nothing yet, But this thing could be anywhere. They move fast when they want to. Delgado sighed, adjusting her headset. Let's hope it's moved on. The last thing we need is a second attack. Meanwhile, back on the beach, Jamie's parents sat huddled together on a bench near the lifeguard station. Lily clung to her mother, her small frame trembling as tears streamed down her face. "Why did this happen, Dad?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Jamie was just surfing. He wasn't hurting anyone. Her father sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. Sometimes nature is just cruel, Lily. It's nobody's fault. The ocean is wild, and we can't control it. But it's not fair, she sobbed, burying her face in her mother's side. Jamie didn't do anything wrong. Her mother kissed the top of her head, her own tears glistening in the sunlight. "I know, sweetheart, I know." Inside the lifeguard station, the radio crackled to life. "This is Patrol 1, came Delgado's voice. "We're not seeing any immediate shark activity in the area, but we've got eyes on a large pod of seals about a mile out. Could be a feeding zone." Mark grabs the radio. "Copy that, Patrol 1. Keep us updated." He turned to his team. "All right, here's the plan. We're closing this beach until further notice. Put up the signs, get patrols on the water, and notify the community. We don't want anyone else out there." "What about the competition?" Mia asked. "It's done," Mark said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We're not risking any more lives." Tyler walked back to the water's edge as the sun began to dip lower in the sky. The waves rolled in, deceptively calm and beautiful. He squatted down, running a hand through his wet hair as he tried to process the day's events. 10, Mia said, approaching him. She handed him a bottle of water and sat down beside him. "You've been quiet. Just thinking," Tyler said, twisting the cap off the bottle. "It all happened so fast. One second he's surfing and the next, I'm pulling him out of the water with half his leg torn up." Mia nodded, staring out at the horizon. "It's the ocean, Ty. It doesn't play by our rules." "Yeah, but..." Tyler trailed off, gripping the bottle tightly. "I can't stop thinking about that look in his eyes. He was so scared, and I couldn't promise him he was going to be okay. I didn't even know if we were going to make it back to shore." "But you did," Mia said, her voice firm. "You kept him alive. That's what matters." Tyler sighed, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "I just hope he makes it." Across town, at the hospital, Jamie lay unconscious in a sterile room, surrounded by a flurry of activity. His leg was bandaged heavily, the damage severe but not beyond repair. Machines beat steadily, monitoring his vitals as doctors worked to stabilize him further. His parents stood outside the room watching through the glass. His mother leaned against the wall, her face pale and drawn. "I can't lose him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You won't," her husband said, though his voice wavered. "Jamie's a fighter. He'll pull through this." Inside the room, Jamie stirred faintly, his lips moving as if he were trying to speak. The nurse leaned closer, her brow furrowing as she caught the faintest whisper. "Shark," Jamie murmured, his voice barely above a breath. "It's still out there." The nurse's face tightened, and she adjusted the monitors. "Rest, Jamie," she said softly. "You're safe now." But the boy's words lingered in her mind, echoing against the hum of the machines. Back at the beach, the patrol boat returned to shore, its occupants disembarking with grim expressions. "Anything?" Mark asked as Delgado and Graham approached. "No sign of the shark," Delgado said, shaking her head. "But that doesn't mean it's gone. The seals offshore are prime feeding targets. If it's still hungry, it could stick around." Mark nodded, his face set with determination. "Then we stay vigilant. This beach stays closed until we're absolutely sure it's safe." Tyler watched the conversation from a distance, his jaw tightening. The ocean, once his sanctuary, now felt like a place of hidden menace. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. He whispered under his breath, "It's not over." The ambulance roared down the Pacific Coast Highway, its sirens cutting through the evening air. Inside, the cramped space buzzed with urgency as paramedics worked over Jamie Carter. The metallic tang of blood mixed with the antiseptic scent of the ambulance as they fought to keep him stable. "He's losing too much blood," one of the paramedics shouted, her gloved hands pressing down on the makeshift tourniquet Tyler had tied around Jamie's thigh. "Get another 4 in him now." Jamie groaned weakly, his head rolling to one side. His skin was pale, his lips tinged blue. The sound of the sirens and the blur of faces around him felt distant, surreal. Pain radiated from his mangled leg, sharp and unrelenting. But the world around him was slipping into a haze. "Stay with us, Jamie," the paramedic urged, leaning closer to his face. "I need you to keep your eyes open. Can you hear me?" Jamie's eyelids fluttered, his voice barely audible. "It hurts," he whispered. "I know it does, sweetheart, though we're almost there," she said, her voice softening. "Just hold on for me." The driver's voice crackled over the radio. "ETA to St. John's Hospital, 3 minutes. The paramedic nodded and grabbed the radio. "Tell them we've got a 17-year-old male, massive blood loss from a shark attack. Trauma team needs to be ready." At St. John's Hospital, a trauma team was already preparing. Nurses and doctors gathered in the ER, reviewing the details sent ahead. Dr. Amelia Torres, the lead trauma surgeon on call, snapped on a pair of gloves as she addressed the team. "This is going to be a critical case," she said. "Some the report, the patient's femoral artery might be compromised. We need to stop the bleeding immediately or he won't make it." One of the nurses, Sarah, glanced at the equipment tray. "Do we know how bad the damage is?" Dr. Torres shook her head. "Not yet, but based on what I've heard, it's severe. Get the prepped. We're not wasting a second." The ambulance screeched to a halt in the emergency bay, and the back doors flew open. The paramedics wheeled Jamie out, barking updates to the waiting team. 17-year-old male, shark attack to the left leg, the paramedic reported. Severe lacerations, possible arterial damage. Blood pressure is 70/40 and dropping. Dr. Torres stepped forward, her presence commanding. "Let's move him. Get him to Trauma 1. I want 2 units of O-negative ready, and call vascular. This could require microvascular repair." Jamie's parents arrived moments later, sprinting through the automatic doors with terror etched on their faces. His mother clutched her chest, gasping as she saw the trail of blood leading into the ER. "Jamie, where's Jamie?" she cried, grabbing a nurse by the arm. The nurse tried to calm her. "He's being taken care of, ma'am. The doctors are doing everything they can. We need to see him," Jamie's father demanded, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and fear. Dr. Torres appeared briefly, her expression serious but calm. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, I'm Dr. Torres. Your son is in critical condition, but we're doing everything possible. Right now, the best thing you can do is wait." "Wait," Jamie's mother sobbed. "I can't just wait while my son—" "I understand," Dr. Torres interrupted gently but firmly. "But he needs immediate surgery. I promise you, we'll do everything we can to save him." Inside the operating room, the atmosphere was tense. Jamie lay unconscious on the table, the machines around him beeping rhythmically. His leg was a mess of torn muscle and shredded tissue, and the surgical team moved with precision to assess the extent of the damage. "Femoral artery is intact, but barely," Dr. Torres said, her eyes scanning the wound. "We're gonna need to repair this quickly. Sarah, suction. John, get the vascular clamps ready." The team worked in near silence, their focus absolute. Dr. Torres's hands were steady as she sutured the artery, her mind racing through every step of the procedure. One wrong move and Jamie could bleed out in minutes. "Vitals are stabilizing," Sarah reported, glancing at the monitor. "BP is up to 90/60. Dr. Torres allowed herself a brief moment of relief before refocusing. Good. Let's move on to the muscle repair. We need to salvage as much function as we can. Hours later, as the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Jamie was moved to the ICU. His leg was heavily bandaged, immobilized in a brace. Machines monitored his every breath, every heartbeat. Outside the room, his parents sat huddled together, their faces lined with exhaustion. Dr. Torres emerged, pulling her surgical cap off. She approached them, her expression both tired and hopeful. "How is he?" Jamie's father asked, standing abruptly. "He's stable," Dr. Torres said. "The damage to his leg was extensive, but we were able to save it. He's going to need multiple surgeries for reconstruction, and there's a long road ahead, but he's alive." Jamie's mother burst into tears, her hands covering her face. Thank you so much." Dr. Torres placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're strong. That helped more than anything. We'll monitor him closely over the next 48 hours. Later that morning, Tyler Jensen arrived at the hospital. Still in his lifeguard uniform, he looked worn and haunted. He approached the front desk, hesitating for a moment before speaking. "I'm here to see Jamie Carter," he said. I was the one who pulled him out of the water." The receptionist nodded. "Families in the ICU waiting room. You can head up." Tyler found Jamie's parents sitting by the window, their eyes heavy with sleeplessness. Jamie's mother looked up, recognition flickering in her gaze. "You're the lifeguard," she said softly, standing. "You saved him." Tyler nodded, his throat tight. I wanted to check on him, see how he's doing." Jamie's father extended a hand, his grip firm. "You gave us our son back. We'll never forget that." Tyler nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just did my job." Inside the ICU, Jamie stirred for the first time. His eyes fluttered open, the harsh light of the room making him wince. His throat was dry, and his body felt like it had been hit by a freight train. Slowly, he turned his head, his gaze landing on the bandaged mass that was once his leg. "Saini," his mother said, rushing to his side. "Oh, sweetheart, you're awake." He blinked, his voice hoarse. What happened?" His father leaned over him. "You were attacked by a shark, Jamie. You're in the hospital, but you're going to be okay." Jamie's brows furrowed as fragmented memories returned the wave. The impact, the teeth, the shark, he whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "It was so fast. You don't have to think about that right now," his mother said, stroking his hair. "You're safe. That's all that matters." But Jamie couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed forever. The ocean he loved so much had turned on him, and he wasn't sure if he could ever return to it. As he drifted back into a fitful sleep, the faint echo of the shark's presence lingered in his mind, a shadow that wouldn't easily fade. The hospital room was quiet except for the soft hum of the machines monitoring Jamie Carter's vitals. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting striped patterns on the sterile white walls. Jamie lay propped up in the hospital bed, his face pale and drawn. His leg, heavily bandaged and immobilized, was suspended in a sling. Every small movement sent a jolt of pain up his body, a sharp reminder of what he'd endured. His mother sat in the chair beside him, her hands clasped tightly around a steaming cup of coffee. She looked exhausted, her face edged with worry and sleeplessness. Jamie stirred, his head turning toward her. "Hey, Mom," he rasped, his voice hoarse. She jumped slightly at the sound of his voice, setting the coffee aside and leaning forward. "Jamie, honey, you're awake. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," she muttered, wincing as he shifted slightly. Is my leg okay?" His mother hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. "The doctor saved it, Jamie, but it's bad. You're going to need more surgeries and the recovery. It's going to take time." Jamie swallowed hard, the reality of her words sinking in. He glanced down at his leg, unable to see much through the layers of bandages and braces. A lump formed in his throat. What if I can't surf again?" he asked quietly, his voice trembling. Tears filled his mother's eyes, and she reached out to squeeze his hand. "Let's take it one step at a time, sweetheart. Right now, we're just thankful you're alive." Later that morning, a knock on the door broke the stillness. Tyler Jensen, still in his lifeguard uniform, peeked his head in. Jamie's face lit up slightly at the sight of him. "Hey, Tid," Tyler said, stepping inside. "Mind if I come in?" "Yeah," Jamie said, his voice weak but welcoming. "Come on in." Tyler pulled up a chair, his posture tense. He looked Jamie over, his expression a mix of relief and guilt. "You gave us all a scare out there," he said, trying to keep his tone light. Jamie managed a faint smile. "Yeah, Will. Wasn't exactly my plan for the day." Tyler chuckled softly, then sobered. "I just wanted to check on you. Make sure you're hanging in there." Jamie nodded, his fingers absently picking at the edge of his blanket. "I don't really remember much, just the ways, then something hitting me, and teen." Tyler leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "It was bad, Jamie, but you fought hard. Most people wouldn't have made it out of that situation. You're tough, and that's going to help you get through this." Jamie looked down, his face clouded with doubt. "I don't feel tough. I feel broken." "You're not broken," Tyler said firmly. "You're alive, and that's what matters. The ocean doesn't give second chances often, but you got one. Don't waste it." The hospital wasn't the only place buzzing with news of Jamie's survival. Back in Malibu, the attack had become the talk of the town. The once bustling beach was eerily quiet, the competition banners still flapping in the breeze. Signs warning of shark activity lined the entrances to the sand, and patrol boats continued to monitor the water. At the Malibu surf shop, a small group of locals gathered around the counter, their faces serious. Ryan, Jamie's friend and fellow competitor, leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "I can't believe it happened to Jamie," Brian said, shaking his head. "He's one of the best surfers out there. If it can happen to him, it can happen to anyone," said Maya, another surfer. "The ocean's unpredictable. We all know that. But a great white?" Ryan said, his voice tinged with fear. "That's not just unpredictable. That's terrifying." Maya nodded solemnly. "We've all seen them out there, but they usually don't come this close. Something's changing." The shop owner, an older man named Joe, spoke up from behind the counter. "It's the time of year. Warmer waters, more seals in the area. It's their feeding season." Ryan frowned. "So what do we do? Just stop surfing?" Joe sighed. "You don't stop, but you respect it. You stay alert. You don't go out alone. And if something doesn't feel right, you trust your gut." Meanwhile, the official report on the attack was being finalized. At the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Office, marine biologist Dr. Emily Larkins reviewed the data. She tapped a pen against her clipboard as she studied drone footage and tracking data from the patrol boats. "This was a juvenile great white," she explained to a small group of local officials. "Approximately 12 to 14 feet long. Its behavior was typical of a predator testing its prey. It likely mistook Jamie for a seal." Sheriff Daniels, a stocky man with a no-nonsense demeanor, leaned back in his chair. "And you're sure it's moved on?" Dr. Larkin sighed. "We can't say for sure. Sharks are transient. It might have moved on to another area, but it could also return. That's why monitoring is so important." Daniels rubbed his temples. "The beach is the backbone of this town. We can't keep it closed forever. But we can't ignore the risks," Dr. Larkins countered. "Education and awareness are key. If people understand the risks, they can make informed decisions." Back at the hospital, Jamie sat up in bed, flipping through channels on the small TV mounted to the wall. He stopped when he saw a news segment about the attack. Footage of the competition played, followed by interviews with locals and surfers. Jamie Carter, a promising young surfer, was attacked by a great white shark during a local competition, the anchor said. Experts say such attacks are rare, but they serve as a reminder of the ocean's unpredictability. Jamie stared at the screen, his jaw tightening. The anchor's words felt hollow, the phrases carefully sanitized. Where? Unpredictable. As if they could explain the pain coursing through his leg or the nightmares replaying the attack over and over. A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Dr. Torres entered, her expression kind but professional. "How are we feeling today, Jamie?" she asked, pulling up a stool. Jamie shrugged. "Alive, I guess." "That's a good place to start," she said with a small smile. "Your surgery went well, but you've got a long road ahead. Physical therapy is going to be crucial if you want to regain function in your leg." Jamie looked down at his lap. Will I ever surf again?" Dr. Torres hesitated, then spoke carefully. "It's too soon to say, but with the right mindset and determination, there's a good chance you can get back out there. It might not be exactly the same, but it's possible." Jamie nodded slowly, her words sinking in. Determination. Mindset. He wasn't sure he had either right now, but the thought of never riding a wave again was unbearable. As Dr. Torres left, Jamie's mother returned, carrying a small box. She set it on the bed with a smile. "What's this?" Jamie asked. "Something to remind you of how strong you are," she said. Inside the box was a photo of Jamie surfing at sunrise, the water glowing golden around him. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "The ocean tests us. We endure. Jamie's throat tightened as he held the photo. For the first time since the attack, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he wasn't broken after all. The first thing Jamie noticed when he woke up was the dull, aching throb in his leg. He'd grown used to it over the past few days, a constant reminder of what had happened. His room in St. John's Hospital was sterile and quiet, the faint hum of machines the only sound. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise, casting warm orange hues across the walls. But there was no warmth in Jamie's chest. Not today. A nurse entered, her rubber-soled shoes squeaking softly on the tile floor. "Good morning, Jamie," she said with a practiced cheerfulness, glancing at the monitors. "How are you feeling today?" Jamie shrugged, his face impassive. "The same," he said flatly. "When can I leave?" The nurse offered a sympathetic smile. "Dr. Torres is going to come by later to talk about that. But first, breakfast and your morning meds." She placed a tray on the small table next to him and adjusted the angle of his bed. Jamie barely glanced at the food, a pile of scrambled eggs that looked like they'd been reheated one too many times and a piece of toast that could double as a frisbee. "Thanks," he muttered. "Cheer up, kiddo," the nurse said gently. "You're making progress, even if it doesn't feel like it." Progress. The word felt meaningless. Jamie stared out the window as the nurse left, the tray untouched. How could he think about progress when he couldn't even imagine standing on his own 2 feet, let alone surfing again? Later that morning, Dr. Amelia Torres arrived, her clipboard tucked under one arm. She was accompanied by Sarah, the nurse Jamie had grown to trust over the past week. Dr. Torres pulled up a chair and sat beside Jamie, her expression calm but serious. "Good morning, Jamie," she said. "How are you holding up?" Jamie shrugged again. "Okay, I guess. When can I leave?" Dr. Torres folded her hands. "That's what I want to talk to you about. Your leg is healing well, but you've got a long road ahead of you. Physical therapy is going to be crucial. We can't discharge you until we know you're stable enough to start outpatient therapy." "How long?" Jamie asked, his voice tinged with frustration. "A week? 2? Possibly longer," she said honestly. "It depends on how quickly your body responds. But I want you to know that it's not just about healing physically. What you've been through is traumatic, Jamie. The psychological recovery is just as important." Jamie's jaw tightened, and he looked away. "I just want to get out of here." Dr. Torres leaned forward, her voice softening. "I know you do, and you will. But you need to be patient with yourself. The physical therapist arrived that afternoon. Her name was Grace, and she was tall and lean with an air of no-nonsense determination. She walked into Jamie's room carrying a pair of crutches and a small smile. "You must be Jamie," she said, her voice upbeat. "I'm Grace, your physical therapist. You ready to get started?" Jamie eyed the crutches warily. "Do I have a choice?" Grace chuckled. "Not really, but I promise I'll take it easy on you today." With the help of Sarah, Grace helped Jamie into a sitting position on the edge of the bed. He winced as his injured leg shifted, the pain sharp and immediate. "Easy," Grace said. "Take your time. I'm going to teach you how to use these crutches so you can get around. It'll take some practice, but you'll get the hang of it." Jamie gritted his teeth as he stood, his weight heavily supported by Grace and Sarah. His left leg was useless, hanging limp and bandaged. Sweat beaded on his forehead as Grace positioned the crutches under his arms. "Okay," Grace said. "You're going to put your weight on your hands, not your armpits, and take small steps at first. Let's try a few." Jamie hesitated, then moved forward awkwardly. The crutches wobbled slightly, and he almost lost his balance. But Grace steadied him. "There you go," she said. "One step at a time." The hallway felt endless. Every movement sent a jolt of pain through Jamie's leg, and his arms ached from the effort of supporting his weight. But Grace was patient, guiding him through each step. "You're doing great," she said as they neared the end of the corridor. "This is a big step, Jamie." Literally. Jamie stopped, his breath ragged. "I'm not sure I can make it back." Grace smiled. "You can, and you will." He looked at her, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "What's the point? I can't even walk right now. C'est feel it impossible." Grace's expression softened. "I won't lie to you, Jamie. It's going to be hard. Harder than anything you've done before. But you've already survived something most people wouldn't. That says a lot about your strength." Jamie didn't reply, his jaw set as he focused on putting one crutch in front of the other. That evening, Jamie's parents arrived, their faces lighting up when they saw him sitting up in bed. His mother rushed to his side, wrapping him in a gentle hug. "You look so much better today," she said, her voice filled with relief. "Grace made me get out of bed," Jamie replied, his tone flat. "It wasn't fun." His father chuckled, pulling up a chair. "Well, that's progress, isn't it? Everyone keeps saying that," Jamie muttered. "Progress, progress, progress. But I still feel like I'm stuck." His mother smoothed his hair. "Jamie, it's okay to feel frustrated. But you're moving forward, even if it doesn't feel like it. One step at a time." Jamie sighed, his fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket. "What if I can't surf again?" His father's expression turned serious. "You've always been a fighter, Jamie. This is just another wave you have to ride." "It's not that simple," Jamie said, his voice breaking. "The ocean, it doesn't feel the same anymore. It feels dangerous." His parents exchanged a glance, their worry evident. His mother reached for his hand. "Jamie, it's okay to feel that way, but the ocean didn't turn on you. It's just what it is, wild and unpredictable. You've always respected it, and that's what kept you safe before. You can find that respect again." Jamie didn't answer, but her words lingered in his mind. That night, Jamie couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, the events of the attack replaying in his head. The waves, the impact, the searing pain, the shadow of the shark circling beneath him. He sat up suddenly, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. Panic clawed at his chest as the memories overwhelmed him. The door creaked open, and Sarah, the night nurse, peeked in. "Jamie, are you okay?" Jamie shook his head, his hands trembling. I can't stop thinking about it." Sarah came to his side, her voice soothing. "That's normal, Jamie. You've been through something incredibly traumatic. Your mind needs time to process it. I feel like it's still out there," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Like it's waiting for me." Sarah sat down beside him, her tone gentle. It's not out there, Jamie. You're safe here. But those feelings, they're real and they're valid. Have you thought about talking to someone? A therapist, maybe? Jamie hesitated. I don't know. What would I even say? Whatever you need to, Sarah said. It's not about having the right words. It's about letting someone help you carry the weight. Jamie nodded slowly. Maybe. As Sarah left, Jamie lay back down, his thoughts racing. He didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, he considered the possibility of facing his fears not alone, but with help. And maybe, just maybe, he could find his way back to the waves. The sun shimmered on the surface of the Pacific as lifeguard Tyler Jensen leaned against the rail of the lifeguard tower, scanning the horizon with his binoculars. The beach had been quieter than usual since Jamie Carter's shark attack 2 weeks ago. The once bustling Malibu shoreline now felt like a ghost of itself, with only a few brave swimmers and surfers venturing into the water. The signs warning of shark activity still dotted the entrances to the beach, a stark reminder of the ocean's unpredictable dangers. Anything out there? Mia asked, joining Tyler in the tower. She carried a steaming cup of coffee and looked just as tired as he felt. Nothing so far, Tyler replied, lowering the binoculars. But I can't shake the feeling that something's still out there. Mia sipped her coffee. The patrols haven't spotted anything in days. Maybe the shark moved on. Maybe, Tyler said, though he didn't sound convinced. His mind drifted to Jamie, still recovering in the hospital. He'd visited him a few times, but each visit left him feeling uneasy. The once vibrant kid who loved the ocean now seemed haunted, his eyes clouded with doubt and fear. As if reading his thoughts, Mia added, "How's Jamie doing?" Tyler sighed. "Physically, he's getting there, but mentally, I don't know. He's not the same." Mia nodded. Who would be? A brush with death like that changes you. A few miles offshore, a fisherman named Greg tightened his grip on the rod as he felt a tug. His small boat rocked gently on the swells, the smell of salt and baitfish thick in the air. "Gotcha," Greg muttered, reeling in his line. The pull was strong, and he grinned at the prospect of a decent catch. But as the line neared the surface, his excitement turned to dread. A mutilated fish, its body half gone, dangled from the hook. The water below swirled with red. "What the hell?" Greg whispered, leaning over the side. Then he saw it, a massive shadow gliding beneath the boat. His breath caught in his throat as the unmistakable dorsal fin broke the surface, slicing through the water with eerie precision. "Great white," Greg said to himself, his voice trembling. He fumbled for his radio, his fingers clumsy with fear. "This is Greg Manning, offshore about 3 miles from Malibu Beach. Got a big one out here. Repeat, a great white. Might want to warn the folks on shore." The call came through to the lifeguard station minutes later. Tyler grabbed the radio, his heart sinking as he listened to the report. "Copy that, Greg," he said. "We'll notify the proper authorities and keep people out of the water." Mia glanced at him, her expression grim. "Looks like you were right." Tyler set the radio down, running a hand through his hair. "We need to shut the beach down completely." "Good luck convincing people of that," Mia said. "The city's already losing money with the drop in visitors. Another closure won't go over well." "It's not about money," Tyler snapped. "It's about keeping people alive." Mia raised her hands defensively. "Hey, I'm on your side, but you know how it is." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues, Jamie Carter sat in his hospital bed, staring at the television. The news was on, and the anchor's voice caught his attention. Authorities have issued another warning for Malibu Beach after a confirmed sighting of a great white shark offshore. The anchor reported. This comes just weeks after a shark attack left 17-year-old Jamie Carter critically injured. Jamie's chest tightened. The shark hadn't left. It was still out there. His mother walked in carrying a tray of food. "Jamie, honey, you should eat something." Jamie didn't respond. His eyes stayed glued to the screen. "Jamie?" his mother prompted, setting the tray on the bedside table. It's still out there, Jamie said quietly. The shark, it's still there. His mother sighed, sitting beside him. I saw the news too, but the authorities are doing everything they can to keep people safe. Jamie shook his head. You don't understand. It's not just about safety. It's like it's waiting. For what? She asked gently. Jamie's jaw tightened. For someone else. The next day, Tyler stood in a town meeting packed with concerned residents. City officials, local business owners, and beachgoers filled the room, their voices blending into a cacophony of worry and frustration. We can't keep the beach closed forever, a man in a suit argued. This town relies on tourism. The longer we keep it closed, the more damage we do to our economy. And what happens when someone else gets attacked? Tyler countered, standing at the front of the room. The shark is still out there. We have to take this seriously. What are the odds of another attack? Someone shouted. Shark attacks are rare. Tell that to Jamie Carter. Tyler shot back, his voice rising. The room fell silent. He almost died out there, and now we know the shark hasn't left. Are you really willing to risk someone else's life just to keep the tourists happy? Dr. Emily Larkins, a marine biologist who had been studying the recent activity, stepped forward. Tyler's right, she said. This shark is likely a juvenile, still learning how to hunt. That makes its behavior unpredictable. We can't assume it's gone or that it won't attack again. Meanwhile, back at the beach, a group of surfers ignored the warnings and paddled out. Ryan, one of Jamie's friends, was among them, his determination outweighing his fear. This is stupid, Maya said as they paddled toward the lineup. We shouldn't be out here. It's been weeks, Brian said. We can't just stop living our lives because of one shark. That one shark almost killed Jamie, Maya snapped. What if it comes back? Ryan hesitated, glancing at the horizon. The waves were perfect, rolling in smooth, glassy sets. I'm not letting fear keep me off the water. This is who we are, Maya. It's what we do. Maya reluctantly followed, but the unease in her gut didn't fade. From the lifeguard tower, Tyler spotted the surfers and cursed under his breath. He grabbed his binoculars, scanning the water. Damn it, they're not supposed to be out there. Mia joined him, following his gaze. Should we call them in? Yeah, Tyler said, grabbing the radio. And get the patrol boat ready, just in case. Out on the water, the mood shifted. The surfers joked and laughed as they caught waves. But Maya's unease grew. Then she saw a dark shadow moving beneath the surface, far too large to be a fish. Ryan, she hissed, paddling toward him. Something's out here. Ryan laughed nervously. It's probably just a dolphin. No, Maya said firmly. It's not. The dorsal fin broke the surface, cutting through the water with terrifying grace. Ryan's eyes widened, and the laughter died on his lips. Shark, Maya screamed, turning her board toward the shore. Everyone, get out of the water. Panic erupted as the surfers paddled frantically, their boards slicing through the waves. The great white shark surged toward them, its massive body creating a wake. Ryan lost his balance and tumbled into the water, his board flipping over. He surfaced, gasping for air, as the shadow closed in. Ryan, Maya shouted, her voice cracking. Tyler and Mia were already on the patrol boat, speeding toward the surfers. Hold on, Tyler yelled as they approached. The shark brushed against Ryan's board, its presence suffocatingly close. Just as it circled for another pass, the patrol boat roared into the area, its engine loud and disruptive. Tyler reached out, grabbing Ryan's arm and hauling him onto the boat. You okay? He asked, his heart pounding. Ryan nodded, trembling. It was right there. It was so close. We've got you, Mia said, steering the boat back to shore. On land, the surfers regrouped, their faces pale with shock. Maya wrapped a towel around Ryan, her hands shaking. I told you we shouldn't have gone out there. Ryan nodded, his bravado shattered. You were right. I was stupid. Tyler stood nearby, his expression grim. This isn't a game, he said. That shark's still out there, and it's not going anywhere. If we're going to share the ocean, we have to respect its rules, or someone else is going to get hurt. The ocean stretched out before them, vast and indifferent. The great white had vanished beneath the waves, but its presence lingered, a silent reminder of the power and danger of the sea. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and fresh linens, but to Jamie Carter, it was the scent of confinement. He had spent over a month recovering from the shark attack that had nearly claimed his life. While his leg was healing, the emotional scars remained raw. The doctors had cleared him for discharge that morning, and now he sat in a wheelchair, his crutches resting across his lap, staring out the wide glass doors that led to the parking lot. You ready, kiddo? His dad asked, standing behind him with an awkward smile. It's a beautiful day out there. Jamie didn't respond right away. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, where a thin line of blue hinted at the ocean beyond the hills. The sight filled him with a mix of longing and dread. Finally, he nodded. Dia, let's go. His mom walked ahead, holding the car door open as his dad wheeled him over. They helped him ease into the back seat, careful not to jostle his injured leg. The ride home was quiet, the silence punctuated only by the hum of the engine and the occasional car honking in the distance. When they reached their house, Jamie saw something that made his stomach twist. His surfboard, the one he had been riding the day of the attack, was propped against the side of the garage. The sight of its chipped nose and the faded shark tooth decal triggered a wave of memories. The wave, the strike, the pain. Jamie? His mom's voice broke through his thoughts. Do you need help getting inside? He shook his head. I got it. Leaning on his crutches, he hobbled toward the front door, each step a reminder of how much had changed. Inside, his little sister Lily greeted him with a cautious hug, her usual energy dampened. Welcome home, she said softly, her eyes flicking to his leg. Thanks, Jamie muttered, ruffling her hair. He made his way to the couch, collapsing onto it with a groan. His parents hovered nearby, unsure of what to say. The days that followed were a blur of physical therapy appointments and restless nights. Jamie struggled with the exercises Grace, his therapist, had given him, his frustration mounting with every faltering step. You're doing great, Grace encouraged during one session. You've come so far already, Jamie scoffed, dropping onto a bench and wiping sweat from his brow. It doesn't feel like it. I'm still limping around like an old man. Progress takes time, Grace said, sitting beside him. You survived a shark attack, Jamie. That's huge. Give yourself credit. Jamie glanced at her, his jaw tightening. What's the point if I can't surf again? Grace hesitated, choosing her words carefully. The point is reclaiming your life. Surfing might come later, but first you have to believe you can move forward. A week later, Tyler Jensen showed up at Jamie's house unannounced. Jamie was sitting in the backyard, staring at the waves in the distance, when he heard the familiar voice. Hey Tid, Tyler called, walking over. Thought I'd check in on you. Jamie looked up, surprised but not unhappy to see the lifeguard. Hey. Tyler sat down across from him, resting his elbows on his knees. How's the leg? Jamie shrugged. Better, I guess. Still feels weird. Yeah, I bet, Tyler said. He paused, studying Jamie's face. How about you? How are you holding up? Jamie hesitated, then admitted, I don't know. I can't stop thinking about it. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in the water. I feel it all over again. Tyler nodded. That's normal, Jamie. What you went through, no one just shakes that off. It takes time. Jamie looked down at his hands. What if I can't ever go back out there? Tyler leaned forward. You don't have to rush it. But I'll tell you this, the ocean didn't take you away that day. It gave you another chance. You just have to figure out what to do with it. That conversation stayed with Jamie. A few days later, he made a decision. With his parents' help, he returned to the beach for the first time since the attack. The sight of the familiar shoreline filled him with both comfort and fear. The lifeguard towers, the rolling waves, the salty breeze, it was all as he remembered. Yet everything felt different. Nili ran ahead, her bare feet kicking up sand as she shouted, "Come on, Jamie! You can do it!" Jamie gripped his crutches tightly, his breath coming in short bursts as he hobbled closer to the water. His parents stayed a few steps behind, giving him space but ready to intervene if needed. When he reached the edge of the surf, Jamie stopped. The water lapped at his toes, cool and inviting. He stared at the waves, his chest tightening as memories of the attack surged to the surface. "You okay?" his dad asked gently. Jamie nodded, though his throat felt dry. "I just need a minute." He stood there, the ocean stretching endlessly before him. Felt like a living thing, powerful, beautiful, and dangerous. Part of him wanted to run, to never set foot in the water again. But another part, buried deep, refused to let fear win. A few surfers paddled out beyond the break, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Jamie watched them, a pang of longing twisting in his gut. "You're stronger than you think, Jamie," his mom said, stepping beside him. "This place is a part of you. It always has been." Jamie swallowed hard, his eyes stinging. "I'm not ready." "That's okay," she said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You'll know when you are." As the weeks passed, Jamie returned to the beach more often. He started small, sitting on the sand, watching the waves, letting the ocean's rhythm soothe his nerves. Each visit felt like a tiny step forward. One morning, Tyler met him there, carrying a soft-top surfboard. "I brought something for you," he said, setting the board down. Jamie frowned. "I can't surf. You know that." "Not yet," Tyler said, "but you can paddle. Let's get you back on the water, even if it's just for a few minutes." Jamie hesitated, his heart pounding. What if it happens again?" "It won't," Tyler said firmly. "And if it does, you've got people watching your back." Jamie stared at the board, then at the water. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, let's do it." With Tyler's help, Jamie waded into the surf, the water cool against his skin. He lay flat on the board, his arms trembling as he paddled. Each stroke felt like a victory, a small reclaiming of the part of himself he thought he'd lost. "You're doing great," Tyler said, paddling beside him. "Take it slow." Jamie's breaths came in short bursts, his muscles straining. But as he reached the calm waters beyond the break, a sense of peace washed over him. The fear didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled him. "See," Tyler said with a grin, "you've still got it." Jamie looked around, the vast expanse of the ocean stretching in every direction. For the first time since the attack, he felt a spark of hope. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but he wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. The waves rolled on, indifferent to his fears, and Jamie realized he didn't have to conquer the ocean, he just had to learn to coexist with it again. The first month after Jamie's release from the hospital had passed in a blur. The physical therapy was grueling, each session a painful reminder of what had been lost and what still had to be regained. Jamie had managed to return to the beach, cautiously stepping back into the rhythm of his life, though surfing felt impossible, at least for now. In the evenings, he'd sit with his family on the porch, his crutches leaning against the side of the house, the ocean visible in the distance. He'd longed to be back, out there, to feel the rush of the waves beneath him, but the idea of getting back on a board seemed unimaginable. He had trouble even watching others surf without that deep, gnawing sense of fear creeping back. It was a Wednesday when the official report on the shark attack was finally released to the public. The local news stations broke the story at noon, and by the time Jamie sat down to lunch, his mother had already seen the broadcast. "Jamie, you need to see this," she called from the living room, her voice trembling with the tension that had been building over the past weeks. Jamie wheeled himself into the living room, his crutches clicking on the hardwood floor. His mother was sitting on the couch, the TV remote in her hand, her eyes fixed on the screen. Authorities have now released their official findings on the shark attack that took place last month in Malibu. The news anchor said, the attack, which left 17-year-old Jamie Carter with critical injuries, was identified as a rare encounter with a juvenile great white shark. Experts believe the shark was likely hunting seals when it mistook Carter for prey. Local marine biologists are calling this an unprovoked attack, but they warn that the area remains a high-risk zone due to the presence of large marine predators. Jamie's eyes drifted over to the TV screen, where a photo of him, taken during the surf competition, flashed on the screen. His heart tightened in his chest. "It's not your fault," his mom said, her voice soft but filled with emotion. She reached over and squeezed his hand, but Jamie pulled it back, feeling a rush of anger rise up inside him. "Not my fault," he snapped. "The ocean didn't attack me, Mom. A shark did. They're calling it unprovoked." His voice caught on the last word. "I didn't do anything to deserve this." His mom sighed, her expression one of helplessness. "I know you didn't, Jamie. I'm not saying that, but it's over now. You're here, you're alive, and that's all that matters." Jamie turned away, refusing to look at the screen. His mind raced with thoughts of what the media was saying. He didn't want to be some headline, a cautionary tale. He didn't want to be reduced to a statistic in the aftermath of an attack that was only a reminder of how powerless he'd felt in that moment. The following days were a blur of interviews and public statements. Local news outlets continued to cover the story, and each time Jamie's name appeared in the headlines, it felt like another piece of his identity was being carved out for public consumption. He hated the way the media treated the event as though it were nothing more than a spectacle, just another shark attack, just another victim. But as the news cycle continued, there was more to the story than just his survival. Reports started coming in about the ongoing investigation by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, CDFW, and their findings on the shark's behavior. Dr. Emily Larkins, a marine biologist from CDFW, held a press conference one morning. Jamie and his family had seen the announcement the night before, and though Jamie hadn't planned on attending, something pulled at him that morning. Today's press conference will address the findings of the official report concerning the shark attack off Malibu Beach last month. Dr. Larkins began, standing at the podium with several documents spread in front of her. "We are able to confirm that the shark in question was a juvenile great white, approximately 12 to 14 feet long. Based on our research, we believe the shark was likely attracted to the area due to the presence of large schools of fish and a nearby seal population. The shark's behavior, including the attack, appears to be the result of a feeding instinct, not territorial aggression." Jamie stood at the back of the crowd, watching Dr. Larkins with a mix of curiosity and frustration. It seemed like they were trying to explain away the attack, rationalizing the shark's behavior as part of the ocean's natural order. But what about the people who lived here? What about him? We also wanted to address concerns from the local community about safety measures. Dr. Larkins continued, adjusting her glasses. "We've implemented increased monitoring around Malibu's beaches, and we are recommending temporary changes in surf patterns, such as no surfing during dusk and dawn, when sharks are most active. We also encourage increased public awareness and safety education regarding shark behavior." "Great," Jamie muttered under his breath. "More reels, more safety stuff. What about my lice? What about my future?" "Jamie," his father said softly, putting a hand on his shoulder. "You don't have to listen to all of this." But Jamie couldn't tear his eyes away from the woman at the podium. He saw the way she spoke with such authority, as though the ocean were just a backdrop to the predictable events of nature. What was the point of this report? It felt like they were just trying to cover their tracks, to explain away the violence of the attack as something beyond their control. The following weeks passed in a haze. Jamie found it harder and harder to focus on anything other than the attack. Each report about shark activity in the area made his stomach churn, and he knew the town was divided on what should be done next. Some wanted the beach to stay open, while others demanded more aggressive measures to keep people out of the water. He could feel the tension in the air, fear mingled with a desire to return to normalcy. One evening, while Jamie sat on the porch with his family, he heard a familiar voice call out to him from the front yard. "Hey, Chanu," Ryan called, holding up a surfboard as he walked toward the house. "Thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing." Jamie's heart sank at the sight of the board. He hadn't even touched his own surfboard since the attack, and seeing Ryan with his own brought a flood of emotions. Ryan had been there the day of the attack, though he'd been one of the lucky ones who managed to escape. "What are you doing here?" Jamie asked, his voice tight. Ryan paused for a moment, the smile on his face faltering. "I just wanted to check in on you, man. You've been through a lot. Thought you might want to get back on the water sometime." Jamie stared at him, his mind racing. A part of him wanted to grab the board, to throw himself into the waves and feel something, anything, but he didn't know if he could. He didn't know if he was ready. "I don't know," Jamie replied, his throat tight. "I don't think I can do it. Not yet." Ryan set the board down and sat beside him on the porch. "You don't have to go out there right now, man. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. But you can't let this thing control you. You've got to take it back." Jamie looked at him, his eyes clouded. "I don't know if I want it back. I don't even know if I'm ever going to surf again. Every time I close my eyes, I see that shark. I feel it, like it's still out there, waiting." Ryan's voice softened. "Jamie, I get it. I do. It's not easy. But what happened to you, what happened to all of us, that doesn't define you. You're more than just a victim of a shark attack. You're Jamie Carter, the best surfer in Malibu. And that's something no shark can take away." Jamie's chest tightened, the weight of Ryan's words sinking in. Maybe it wasn't the shark he needed to fear anymore. Maybe it was himself. "I don't know if I'm ready," Jamie whispered. Ryan nodded, then stood up and grabbed his board. "That's okay. When you are, we'll be here. We'll ride those waves together." As Ryan walked away, Jamie sat in silence, looking out at the ocean. The waves were calling to him, soft and rhythmic, but still dangerous. The fear would always be there, but maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to overcome it. He didn't have to have all the answers now, but one thing was certain. He wouldn't let the ocean take away the one thing that had always made him feel alive. Not without a fight. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore was like a constant hum in the back of Jamie's mind, a steady reminder of both the beauty and the danger that lay just beyond the sand. He sat on the porch of his family's house, staring out at the vast expanse of the Pacific. His legs were tucked under him, the left one still heavy with the weight of healing, the scar of the shark attack still a visible mark on his body. The sun was setting, casting golden light across the water, but to Jamie, it all seemed muted, the colors distant and faded, like a dream he couldn't quite grasp. It had been 6 months since the attack, 6 months of recovery, both physical and emotional. His leg was mostly healed now, though it still ached on rainy days, a reminder that the body's scars never fully fade. His therapy had gone well, and though he still limped slightly, the physical therapist had told him that in time, he'd regain most of his strength. But it wasn't just the physical recovery that Jamie struggled with. It was the psychological toll. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the shark. Every time he looked at the ocean, that fear crept back into his chest, like it might swallow him whole again. It wasn't just the fear of the shark, it was the fear of what had been taken from him, of the boy he used to be before that attack. The one who could ride the waves with reckless abandon. The one who lived for the thrill of the surf. "Hey, Chani," came a voice from the side. He looked up to see his father walking toward him, a familiar smile on his face, though there was something else there too, an understanding, a quiet knowing that things hadn't been easy. "Peng, Dad," Jamie said, pushing himself up from the porch swing and taking a deep breath. The evening air was cool and refreshing, the scent of salt water lingering in the breeze. "What's up?" "I was just thinking," his dad said, pausing beside him. "It's a nice evening. You want to head down to the beach for a bit? Get your feet wet?" Jamie looked out at the water, a flash of hesitation crossing his face. "I don't know, Dad," he said quietly. I'm not really sure if I'm ready for that yet. His dad nodded, understanding without needing to say anything more. You don't have to go, but the beach is still there. The waves are still there. You don't have to face it all at once. Jamie's gaze lingered on the horizon, the sun now sinking lower, the sky shifting from gold to lavender. I know. He let out a breath, unsure of how to put into words what had been swirling inside of him for months. I don't know if I can do it again. What if I can't get back on the board? His dad placed a hand on Jamie's shoulder, the weight of the gesture grounding him. Then don't. You don't have to. You're not the same person you were 6 months ago, Jamie. You're different, and that's okay. I don't want to be different, Jamie muttered, his voice tight. I want to be the way I was before. I want to be able to surf again. I want to feel like myself. I get that, his dad said, his voice softer now, more measured. But maybe, instead of trying to get back to who you were, it's time to focus on who you're going to be. Jamie turned to look at his father, studying his face for a moment before replying, I don't know who that is. His dad smiled, though it was tinged with a sadness that Jamie hadn't expected. You don't need to know yet, but when the time comes, you'll find out. It won't be the same, but that doesn't mean it won't be good. That evening, Jamie went for a walk along the beach with his dad, his crutches still making a soft clicking sound on the sand. Felt different now. Walking here, he wasn't running toward the surf, wasn't feeling that familiar thrill in his chest as he paddled out into the waves. He wasn't sure if he ever would again, but he couldn't deny the pull of the ocean the way it called to him, beckoning him to return. The beach was quiet at this hour, the sky dimming as the last light of day slipped away. A few surfers were out in the distance, catching the last waves of the evening, their silhouettes black against the fading sky. You used to be one of those guys, his dad said, glancing at Jamie with a half smile. You know that, right? Jamie didn't respond at first. He just watched the surfers, his eyes narrowing as he focused on their movements. A tightness settled in his chest, a familiar longing. The thought of going out there again seemed both terrifying and exhilarating. I remember, Jamie said quietly. I remember the first time I paddled out here, not knowing anything, just hoping to catch a wave. I remember how it felt to be out there like I was part of something bigger than myself. His dad nodded. That's the thing about the ocean, is bigger than any of us, and it'll always be there, waiting for you when you're ready. The next morning, Jamie woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his window, the sun already bright in the sky. His parents were already up and moving around, preparing breakfast. The usual calm of the morning seemed a little different today, the air thick with the anticipation of what might come next. Jamie sat up in bed, stretching his legs out in front of him. He had an overwhelming urge to go to the beach again, to see the water, to feel the sand beneath his feet. It wasn't about surfing, not yet, but it was about reclaiming something he couldn't quite name. He grabbed his crutches, carefully standing up, and made his way downstairs. You sure you want to go down there today? His mom asked when she saw him heading for the door. It's okay if you're not ready. Jamie paused at the door, looking back at her. I think I am. I just need to see it. The beach was almost empty when Jamie arrived. The sound of the waves was louder here, crashing rhythmically, as if calling him home. He stood at the edge of the water, his feet sinking into the wet sand as the surf gently lapped at his ankles. For a long moment, Jamie just stood there, letting the sound of the ocean fill him. It was still the same, the waves still surged, still crashed with the same power. The pull of it, the connection, was undeniable. He looked down at his feet, the crutches leaning against his side, and then back at the horizon. He could hear his dad's words in his mind. You don't have to do anything you're not ready for. And for the first time, Jamie realized that maybe he didn't need to rush. Maybe he didn't need to go back to being the person he once was. He could take his time, find his way forward, even if it meant walking into the water without a surfboard. Without thinking, he dropped the crutches and took a step into the surf. letting the cold water rush around his ankles, his knees. The sensation was familiar, grounding, as though the ocean recognized him, accepted him. For the first time in months, Jamie felt something in his chest loosen just a little bit. A wave crested in the distance, not too large, but enough to stir something inside him. He watched as it approached, his body instinctively wanting to paddle out, to ride it, to feel the rush. But he didn't. He let it pass, standing firm as the wave crashed around him. For the first time, Jamie realized that it wasn't the wave that defined him, it was his willingness to face the water, to step into it, even when it terrified him. "God," he whispered to himself, his heart steadying. "I'm good." Over the next few weeks, Jamie returned to the beach every day, though he never went back out into the water. Not yet. He walked along the shoreline, took in the waves from the safety of the sand, and allowed himself to heal not just physically, but emotionally. The fear still lingered, but he didn't let it control him. Instead, he let it coexist with him. He no longer fought it. One afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, Jamie sat on the beach, watching surfers catch the waves. The ocean had become a part of him again, but in a different way. It wasn't the same reckless pursuit of thrill it once had been. It was a quiet respect, a recognition of the power and beauty the sea held. His dad appeared beside him, sitting down on the sand without saying a word. The two of them watched the surfers in silence, the waves crashing as the sun melted into the water. "You know," his dad said after a while, "whenever you're ready, that wave will still be there." Jamie nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Yeah, I know." And for the first time in months, he believed it.